risk these days is not so much taxes, because you're going to have to pay them. The risk these days tend to be, is somebody come after my business? Is it going to be a family member coming after our structure? What are the things that are endangering my overall operation? That's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. The biggest thing is you've got to do planning. And the more upfront you get in front of things, the better you're going to have an option in terms of what you're going to do with things. I'm going to move on a little bit, but I just want you to think about all the stuff that's out there. C-SPAN, CNN, all the different media that's out there that tells you what's going to happen in the future. But what's the reason? Why do we watch this? Because we look at popular press, because we think everybody else has an answer to the future. And really the reason is because we're looking for an answer, because things are so uncertain. What we're going to talk to you about today is creating certainty within your organizational structure, creating opportunities within your organizational structure. By doing that, don't worry so much about what popular press is saying. Get your structure in order, get your house in order, let things take care of themselves over time. That's the most important message. So, the other thing is recognize that affluent people aren't regular people. The options you have as a large business owner, as an affluent person, are different than the regular press. So when the regular press suggests certain things to you, it may not actually be talking to you. The average household income in the United States is $65,000. I suspect none of you are working with people that are making on average $65,000. So your whole experience is going to be different, so you have to approach things differently. So don't take normal things off the rack. Don't just look for a policy, an umbrella policy. You're going to need to do more than that. Business liability verdicts often exceed $3 million. The bigger the company, the bigger the potential for liability. The other thing that's here is your biggest economic risk, and we talked a little about today, divorce. You want to see a company fall apart? Have a nasty divorce. You want to see a family fall apart? Have a nasty divorce. So the more you can set things up ahead of time, the better you're going to protect yourself from that. You have to see. The other thing that's in the United States that seems to be prevalent is there's a sense of lottery. If you're in a lawsuit, everybody wants there to be a big judgment because they feel like it's the lottery. It doesn't really coincide with the actual damages that have taken place. And that's why you want to shield yourself from that liability. So we're going to talk about asset protection. First thing is, this is not about hiding or concealing assets. There's a lot of legislation coming out now. Governments are sharing more information back and forth. The Patriot Act kind of opened up a number of things. If you think you can hide things, you may be getting away from it now. Give it 2 or 3 years and they're going to have some new legislation that's going to find it out. So don't try and hide things, just try to properly structure things. Objectives, you want to have certainty. The more certainty you have, the better your options are for avoiding lawsuits. The other thing is, you want to have situations where you follow, and we heard that today, the structures. If you're going to do a corporation, make sure you follow the structure. It is a separate entity, treat it as such, have minutes, have meetings with board members, have different individuals involved. So let's talk about, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. This is kind of the way we protect assets. There's no shield, which is basically owning it in your own name. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people that do this. They don't put anything in a corporation. They own it all individually, and it's all subject to risk, both at a company level and at an individual level. You can start doing joint owners. That helps you a little bit. Now you move into a corporate structure. That's even better, again, if you follow all the structures. Now there's multi-member domestic LLCs and LPs. Now we're getting a level of protection. Next, you've got irrevocable domestic trusts. Irrevocable meaning it's out of your control. Being out of your control, it's out of your liabilities. So there's a lot of opportunities with irrevocable trusts, but the word irrevocable is often daunting for individuals because it truly means that. You'll set it up, you'll put it in place for a number of family members, and all of a sudden somebody falls out of favor. Can I take them out of that trust? No. You've got to start working around them, but you cannot take them out of that trust. So once it's set up irrevocable, it's done. And that's what gives it that asset protection. The next level is state and federal exemptions. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we've talked about debt shield, and then offshore entities, and captive insurance companies. That's kind of the top end of protection. In any of these, fraud is not going to protect you. If you're moving assets in a situation where you've got a lawsuit pending, you've got liabilities coming, you've got to pay the piper. It's too late. If you set this up ahead of time, it's not fraudulent, but in the middle of the heat of the battle, if you're in a litigation, you start setting up structures, they're going to look right through it. There is no protection from that type of situation. So this is all about pre-planning. So let's talk about asset protection in a statutory context. Pensions and IRAs are protected from creditors, period. They really are. It is one of the best assets you can have. If you're running into trouble, do not raid your pension or your IRA account. I know it sounds simple, but I've seen people do it time and time again. And once it's out, it is not protected. Leave it in. Leave it in your qualified plan because it has a statutory protection. The other thing is homestead laws, where your home is protected. You can have a multi-million-dollar home in Texas and Florida, and it is protected. It is a protected asset. So that makes a lot of sense to do that. I've seen people in Texas that have done other things, which is life insurance and annuities. Florida has one of the strongest life insurance protection laws in the country. Money inside a life insurance contract is not subject to creditors. It is not subject to bankruptcy. It is a protected asset. We remember the large situation in Texas where you had the telecom industry falling apart and then someone declared bankruptcy. What did he have? He had $11 million worth of life insurance and annuities and a $2 million household. But guess what? He got to declare bankruptcy even though he had net assets of $13 million. That's how strong those laws are. And everybody wanted that guy. Everybody wanted a piece of them. But unless you show fraud, those assets are protected because of statutes. And then captive insurance companies are controlled by where you incorporate those, but those are also protected as long as you follow the rules for setting those things up. So why own a small insurance company? Taxation. It is a deduction to transfer those monies into the captive insurance company. You can have those captive insurance companies offshore, so you end up with a double protection. The only thing with the captive insurance company, you have to be very careful. You have to be careful the type of liabilities you're protecting inside a captive insurance company. They have to be legitimate liabilities. I can't just simply say I'm putting aside $50,000 a year for terrorist actions. You have to actually show that you're subject to some terrorist actions, and it's possibly a $50,000 liability every year. You can't just make up liabilities. So typically where we see captive insurance companies are people that have liabilities. These are car dealerships, places where you've got liabilities, manufacturers, where you're actually protecting yourself against defaults and things like that. Those people can offer true protection to themselves. It's self-insuring. So you have to have legitimate risk, and you can protect it with the captive insurance company. It's one of the best ways to shelter income. It's the best ways to transfer assets to your family members because you make your family members the owners of the captive insurance company, and that way all that growth transfers out to the individuals. The only thing is you do not want to claim down your captive insurance company because you can suck all the assets out of that with a significant claim. So you have to be careful of what you're really protecting and what you leave yourself open to. So I try to put an umbrella policy on the captive insurance company to protect yourself against further liabilities. Let's talk about business protection, and let's talk about strategies. Business owner, single entity, maximum liability. First thing you want to do is you want to start segregating things into corporations and then also separate entities for the different pieces, real estate, equipment. Well, let's kind of look at this. By putting a multiple entity approach in place, you're going to shelter different aspects of your business. You can still have those aspects coordinated among each other. I can still be leasing the property to the corporation. As long as it's a legitimate lease arrangement, I have documents in place, I show the checks coming back and forth. That is a legitimate situation. If I have a lawsuit against the corporation, that may not necessarily involve the real estate. Because with this situation, I've segregated the real estate, and the liabilities of the corporation are not incorporated into the real estate. So what you've got to do is separate things out and keep them separated. On the same token, if I have a litigation against the real estate property, it's not going to necessarily involve my corporation, even though the corporation is paying the rent back and forth between the entity. So by separating things, I limit the exposure of the different pieces that I've got inside my asset structure. The other thing I want to talk about is valuation for estate purposes. You own a corporation. That is part of your estate. And the value of that corporation is based on Normal valuation techniques. If you own real estate in that corporation, it's going to be based on the value of that real estate. If it's an operating corporation, it's going to be based on the sales and revenue of that operating corporation. So estate tax purposes, by having multiple structures, does not necessarily limit your estate tax exposure. It limits your liability exposure, but not your estate tax exposure. Now I hear people saying, well, I'm just going to have a corporation, and as I get close to death, I'm just going to transfer the corporation on paper to my children, and nobody's going to figure it out. Well, you know, that's a nice strategy while it works. It's not so good when they figure it out. And they do figure out, because you have to record transfers inside the corporate minutes. Again, you're following corporate structure. So if I transfer things, I have to record it in corporate minutes. It's part of my state filings. It's part of what I do. So it is a document. If somebody wants to dig into things, all they have to do is look at your corporate minute book. If you don't have one, then you're in the bad position of saying, well, I did it, I just can't prove it. And if you're going to ignore the corporate structure, then why should the IRS accept it? So think of it, if you're not accepting the structure, nobody else is going to. So you're going to transfer the assets, and when you do the transfer, you're subject to the gifting laws. If you transfer the debt, you're subject to the estate tax laws. Non-resident aliens are subject to a $60,000 limitation. Anything beyond it that they're transferring of U.S. assets only, subject to estate tax. And so we try to come up with all these elaborate structures on how to get around this. We have multiple individuals. I'll give you two easy solutions. Before you bring in your money or your assets in the United States, separate them out at that time among your families. Don't wait till you get here and then separate among your families. Do it before you come on board with the United States. You have complete access to do whatever you want to before they come to the United States. You can have a corporation set up and make all your family members participants, then drop the assets into that corporation and everybody shares in that. But if you try to do it after you're doing transfers. Second thing is, yes, it's an estate tax, it's 40%, but you know what? Why not just buy insurance to cover it? Why do we set up thousands of dollars of structure that may or may not work? $160,000 of estate tax sounds like a big number, but if you're willing to pay $3,000 a year, you can probably cover it. So sometimes we get so wrapped up in trying to figure out how we get around something, we don't realize we're chasing our tails. Let's just make this simpler. Let's just make this easy. And at the end of the day, what's really interesting about insurance, it is a protected asset. So you don't have to worry about creditors and liabilities. You can own it individually. You can own it in the corporation. It really doesn't matter because either way it's a protected asset. But the third thing is it's portable. Now, in order to get insurance, you typically have to have some kind of connection to the United States in order to buy it. So you can't be a non-resident alien before you transfer and then get insurance. But if you have already purchased properties in the United States, you have a connection, you can typically get insurance. You can be a resident, buy insurance, have that policy. When you repatriate back to another country, that insurance policy becomes an asset of the country you're in. It is a portable asset. Even though it's denominated in US dollars, it is a portable asset. So if you want to pull money out of that policy, you simply make a phone call to the United States, have that money transferred into an account. It is that easy. So sometimes setting up all this elaborate structure, it becomes difficult to unwind. Insurance, being a protected asset, covers your liability while it's here. When it's done, it moves with you back to your foreign country, so it gives you an opportunity to unwind things very cleanly, or have a U.S. asset that isn't taxed as a U.S. asset. Once you move back to your foreign country, that insurance policy is no longer a U.S. asset. It's not part of the estate tax rules of the United States once it goes back. So portability is an important consideration on using your assets and protecting them. Limited liabilities, we talked about that, and how that's probably the entity of choice because of the lack of limitations on who can be a member of that entity. You like to use that for multiple things. You can even use it for real estate, for investments. So it does offer flexibility. It also offers estate planning because it's easily transferred. I can value that entity. I can take discounts in transferring minority issues. So I can use that structure to actually reduce my overall transfer costs of the assets. Again, what I'm saying is, rather than trying to get around the rules, let's use what's existing. If I can take a 35% discount, still leave the parents in control of the assets, take a 35% discount, transfer it onto the children within the rules, I've got $14,000 a person I can do without any limitations. Why not take advantage of that? You give me a $15 million estate, you give me 10 years, I can get that estate down below $5 million with the normal gifting things we have in place. So rather than getting too elaborate, let's look at things a little more practical. And what I'll do is I'll put insurance in place to cover if we miss the timing. If we don't have 15 years, we've got 5. The insurance actually covers the liability. So it's just being smart about things and recognizing time frames and putting contingency plans in place in case that time frame gets cut short. So what is a charging order? This is how limited liabilities protect your individuals from creditors. Charging order basically says, creditor says, I've got a judgment against you as an individual. So I'm going to capture your assets, and you have a family limited partnership interest, you have an LLC interest. That creditor doesn't actually get to sell your interest. That creditor simply stands in the shoes of the person. What that means is they're entitled to whatever that person would be entitled to in the form of distributions. Now, this is generally a family limited partnership where some family member is running this thing, so what happens is they don't actually become a partner, they're just standing in the shoes, so they don't get to touch the assets, they don't get a vote, and if the limited partnership decides to stop transferring assets out, stop making distributions, guess what? They can't force it. So what you have is a situation where a creditor comes in this type of situation. You say to the creditor, listen, we're all family here but you, and we're not going to make any distributions for the next 10 years. So if you want to hang around for 10 years and hope somebody dies or we sell this thing, which we don't have any intention to do, then you can hang around for 10 years and wait for yourself to get paid. Or we'll offer you 10 cents on the dollar to go away. And that's the value of a limited liability company. You can make things go away for substantially discounted dollars. I can't make the creditor go away. I can't tell them to leave, but I can put them in a difficult position where they'll accept a lesser offer than the full liability to go away. And that's a way to clean up those things rather than having them hang around. And that's why this structure becomes so important when you've got creditors coming after you. How to use LLCs for business assets? Separate everything out. I'm going to walk through this pretty quick because I know we're pretty much out of time. But what you want to see is you can put things into a separate LLC for real estate, you can have an operating real estate, and you can even have a servicing LLC that has money going back and forth. Separating each of these helps you protect all those from creditors because each one becomes a separate charging order depending where the liability lies. So because of this, even though a complicated structure seems difficult, once you get comfortable with this, is your best way to protect things. So with that, I'm going to kind of leave it here because I know we have a celebrity coming up at the end, and I don't want to take too much time away from her. So I'll leave it at this point and offer it up for questions.